Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Michael Moore. I'm the Director of Marketing at the San Francisco Design Center. Welcome to Vladimir Kagan Next Generation. Thank you all for coming to Design San Francisco Spring. It's so nice to see all of your faces back in the building after what seems like an interminably long absence. We're really excited to present this program today. To start it off, we wanted to show you a brief retrospective of Vladimir's life and some of his work. As soon as the film is over, the panel will begin. Thank you for coming.
In my work, the most important feature is still my drawing. I conceptualize with a pencil and pen and markers. And the first impression is the best design, and it becomes ultimately the goal to work toward that. I have a young assistant, named is Chris Eitel, takes my freehand drawings, interprets them into the computer. Chris developed a computer rendering. It's been a pleasure to work on this because every day it morphs a little bit more, becomes a little bit more detailed, moves a little bit more away from the computer modeling, and becomes a real piece of sculpture.
He wanted his legacy, I think, to be more about the art form of it. And God knows there's an art form in all the pieces that he does, but specifically that they would be viewed as artistic and not just as a piece of furniture. And I think he captured that. I think he did that well. I think Vladdy was an artist, and he showed it all to us the last 4 years of his life.
He was working for a long time. He went through periods of being almost forgotten, and through periods of incredible fame. I think he's going to be evaluated as an important master of American modern furniture. Specifically in the field of residential design, the great ones, the Eameses, George Nelson, Bertoia, they didn't really design for the home in those years. Kagan's furniture stays as an interesting counterpoint, which corroborates the modern movement and also expands it in a different, very personal direction.
So what I say is, if you live long enough, good things happen. And as a final note, no amount of careful planning can replace good luck.
Hello, hello. Good afternoon, everyone. It's so lovely to see you all here. Thank you for joining us. I think I've had a bit of luck to get to moderate this panel today. It's been an incredible learning experience, and I think to be present at this moment, this pivotal moment when a master's legacy knowledge has been sort of infused into the next generation is really rare. And I've had the privilege of talking to Chris and to Mark about that process, and I'm excited to share it with you today. So thank you for joining us. And I also just wanted to take a moment to thank you guys for being here and flying in and sharing your time. And to Gina and Michael and the amazing team at Kneedler Fauchère. They just always elevate us all and raise the bar, so thank you. So we thought we would begin at the beginning, because Chris has this really fantastic and wacky origin story with Vladimir Kagan that you have to hear. So, Chris, you began as an intern with Vladdy in 2013, correct? And I'm going to let you take it from there. Would you share that story?
Yeah, that's correct. So I flew for the first time by myself to Nantucket in the summer of 2013, where I began to intern for Vladdy, and I remember my bed was in the studio, right behind Vladdy's desk, kind of like built into the wall, and that summer we actually didn't design very much furniture. We went sailing, we did dinner parties.
I can vouch for that.
2 weeks into the internship was my birthday, and Vladdy had planned to go on a Model T tour through Williamsburg, Virginia, with a group of Model T'ers. That was a lot of fun. We made models of his sailboat Corduta, some half-hull models, and finally at the end of the summer we did get into a couple design projects, but it was mostly just like hanging out and kind of having fun, getting to know one another, which might not seem like a super successful internship to some people, but I thought it was pretty great.
Well, and I should have set that up a little better. Clearly, you were a junior in the design program at Kendall at the time.
Yeah.
And just to properly introduce, Chris, as you all know, is the Director of Design and Production for Vladimir Kagan, and Mark Minichiello is the CFO. No, COO, sorry.
COO.
So you did have a legitimate path that you were following, and then you went back to school in the fall.
I did. I was trying to get a bachelor's degree in furniture design and in furniture design specifically, which is a rare thing. So as the summer kind of came to an end, Vladdy was like, hey, we had a lot of fun and we got a couple design projects. Do you want to just stick around? And I was like, well, I've got a semester left before I actually get my degree. And I think my mom would not be happy if I just was like, no, I'm not going to go back to school. And so I went back to Kendall, and Kendall College of Art and Design. It's in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And so I went back and finished my last semester, and I think I was back for maybe a couple weeks, and Vladdy called me up, and he was like, hey, I'm working on a new concept for some furniture design, and if you don't have a job or nobody offers you a job at the end of the semester, if you would like, you can join me in Palm Beach for the winter and help me design these new designs that I've been sketching out. And I was like, well, that sounds like a job to me. So that's what I did.
Another boondoggle.
It's just been completely blowing my mind that there would be this moment where you would have a really classical apprenticeship in the 21st century, that you and Kagan would work in the furniture studio together. He would direct you in how to refine or sculpt one of his pieces. There was this real direct transmission of legacy knowledge. Can you describe how that process felt, what that was like to be in the studio with him?
For the most part, it was fun. I mean, it could be challenging. Vladdy was very difficult to work with and demanded a lot of perfection with what you were doing. But it was a lot of process, and he was really, really open. I was coming from school, and 3D printing was becoming a popular thing, and I was like, can we get a 3D printer? And at first he was a little reluctant, but then after I kept pestering him, he finally gave in, and I don't know, after a while we ended up with 2 3D printers and then 3 3D printers, and he was really into developing different processes and had just a really unique approach, I think, to every design. It wasn't like a set we sketch and then we go in the computer and then we do this. It was all over the place. It was you sketch and you go in the computer and you sketch again and you make a model and you go back into the computer and you just massage this idea that he has until you figure it out. And that was really a challenge. It was his idea. How do we develop it so that he's seeing and getting exactly what's in his mind?
Yeah, there are a lot of images of you we'll see rolling through foam carving and working with him with all kinds of different tools and techniques. That must have been a lot of work, but also just a really fascinating way to see things in 3 dimension. Mm-hmm. And Mark, you joined around the same time as Chris, yes?
Yes.
Can you describe a bit of your internship?
Well, I had retired from retail a few years before, And Vladimir always wanted me to join his company, and I kind of said, I don't know, Vladimir, I think I'm going to retire. I'm going to retire. Ralph Pucci, who I knew very well, used to call me and also say, you know, Mark, you should take, you know, this job. He's looking for somebody to take the company forward. So after a couple of years, I finally took them up on it. I called Vladdy and I said, Vladdy, where are you? And he said, I'm in Palm Beach. He said, there's a JetBlue 445 flight, you know, in 3 hours. Take it and come to Palm Beach. So I arrive at Palm Beach. It's supposed to be like a 2-hour interview, and I was supposed to leave the next morning. I ended up staying for 4 days. These two guys tortured the hell out of me. They took me to a line dancing event. They did everything, but we had a blast. We cooked. We did his blog. I fell in love with Vladdy. Just the design, and it's like being with like the Mick Jagger of mid-century furniture. He was amazing. He was amazing.
Yeah. Right, you're almost soaking up as much as by being in the presence, right? There are some people that just have that aura, and just by being with them, you feel like you're learning something and evolving in a way.
We were the host of Modernism Week in Palm Springs, and I have to tell you, he must have signed 150 books. And there were women crying, anywhere from like 18-year-old to 80-year-olds, like throwing themselves, like, you know, it was amazing, amazing.
So when you came to join the company, can you paint a picture of what it was like at the time, where you found Chris and...
Well, there was a huge amount of opportunity in every aspect of the operation, from the quality of the catalog to quality management, production. It just went on and on. You couldn't go wrong. No matter what you did, it got better. And then when I convinced Vladdy to have Chris stay with us full time, because there was a huge amount of work to do, he finally gave in.
It took some convincing.
Oh, yeah, because, you know what, I had a lot of work to do. So before he joined me full-time, I said, okay, I'll go to Nantucket, we'll do meetings for a week, and I would go, we'd eat breakfast, and before you know it, Mark, make the bouillabaisse sauce. We want to have a dinner party today. And he'd do everything to not do work. So he enjoyed life more than anybody I ever met in my entire life.
And not to frame this too literally, but, you know, clearly with his background having escaped Nazi Europe,
Yeah.
that just, there's a trauma there that's intergenerational, right? That doesn't ever go away. And you see that, right, in so many survivors that you meet. Like, every moment is precious. Life can change on a dime.
And
to
he
really
used
live
to
to the
say,
fullest. Yeah.
if you can do something today, don't wait till tomorrow, because you never know what's going to happen.
Right, right.
He had this kind of fear of like dying in his sleep.
And it's extraordinary. He was working, there are photos that we went through that show him in the studio working up until literally like the week before he passed, just actively with you.
Actually, the day he passed, I was in Miami. He was in Palm Beach. We had an event at Ralph Pucci to unveil the new bronze chair. And I got a call at 4 in the morning, and that was it. But the show went on.
Yes.
There was like 450 people that attended the Pucci event.
Yeah.
I spoke. I didn't even cry. I was like biting the inside of my cheek. But that's what Vladdy would want. The show goes on.
Yes, until live to the fullest at every moment. Yes. Well, that actually was a very pivotal point, because as you've described in this magnificent book, which everyone must have a copy of, there was a piece, the Gigi Chair, that really helped you make this transition from pure hands-on making to, am I saying that correctly, to sort of 3D modeling and bringing those two worlds together.
Yeah, it was, for me, from the development side, it was really like looking at how you make an object and how you make a piece of furniture. And with that chair, the one you're seeing right there in the screen, with that chair, the first one we made, we kind of went all digital on it, and and we got it back, and the guys in the wood shop were like, "This is a toothpick," you know, and they weren't wrong. It was like the scale was so like small and tiny, and you kind of like come to this realization that like what you have in the computer might look great, but that's not necessarily translating correctly when you get it in real life, and so there became this kind of this back and forth, and Vladdy was determined that we could make it the same way that he made like the rocking chair and the low back lounge, and we would do it by hand and in the shop, and it just like the detail that we were searching for in the chair we couldn't really get in that kind of process, and so by this time I was like moved into the Kagan studio in Clifton full time, and Vladdy was like somewhat discouraged back to that point of like, can we get this done before I'm not here anymore, you know, kind of deal, like, and I kind of was like, hey, if you let me work on this for about a month, I think we can take kind of both of these and put it together and come out with something. And so we fired up our 3D printers, and we started 3D printing the chair. We could print like a 6-inch print, and we started 3D printing the chair in 6-inch increments, full scale, and then I would get them printed out, and I would load up a backpack and go on a boondoggle to Nantucket for a week, and we would review them, and I would make notes, and we'd glue them together and clay over, and I would go back and in the studio, and it became this kind of like really, I think, an important way for us to develop and to figure out like how are we going to make this become like a reality, and the process worked. I still use it today. Yeah.
It really was this literal moment of modern craft, right? Where you had old world and new world coming together, and
you still need a hand.
Yeah.
Like you make it on machine, but like
Yeah.
you still have to
You were
glue that
explaining
up and like carve it down. Like there's amount of handwork that is still required to make any chair like that.
So in that chair, there's steam bent pieces of it, CNC, hand carving. It's like the whole, there's no other technique you can use to make a chair.
Yep.
And you know, Chris, you were saying or rather, Mark, when you joined the company, that there was this moment of sort of evaluation where you were looking at the body of work, and there were some, some refinements to be made because some pieces had a departure from what their original intention was. How did that process work?
Nobody went to the
They'd been designed in
showroom.
like 1950.
Yeah, nobody went to the showroom and got feedback from the consultants or the customer. So, like the Ondine chair, Ralph said, Mark, this chair would really sell, but the lumbar is in the wrong spot and the pitch is different. So there was a lot of pieces like that because starting to make them in 1950 with all these different workshop and iterations, by the time it was, 2014, there was, you lost a lot of,
derivative chair.
Like this floating curve, the leg ended up being as thick as a baseball bat. So Chris has the patience of a saint, and he recarved every one of these legs, made all the adjustments for the Ondine chair for the 175E. So we really tweaked the whole line, and everything started selling.
And I think what was important about that time, though, was that I had Vladdy there to kind of like coach me a little bit and be like, oh, this is what I'm looking for. And so it really gave me an insight to the classic collection that I don't think I would have been able to get if I was just studying it on my own or anything. So kind of like enhance the knowledge of like, oh, this is how that leg is supposed to be carved, or that line is supposed to be shaped like this.
It's like the work that had been translated out of its original language, and you had the writer to come in and help you retranslate it. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Amazing.
Like in retail, we used to go on store visits, and the first thing we did was go to clearance racks. And that told us what the customer in that store wasn't buying. So when you went to a showroom and it's like, guys, what's not selling? You used to know exactly it's not selling because of this situation, that situation, you know, and you really learn from what people aren't buying more than what they're buying.
So then you had this beautiful moment of reckoning with Vladdy where you got to sort of repolish the entire collection, right? So how did that evolve into the acquisition by Holly Hunt?
Well, I was there for about 3 months, and Vladimir invited Holly, Andrew Kogan from Knoll, to come and visit the workroom and our facility, and it was really in disarray. It was, you know, kind of like a nightmare. So they came, they were very sweet, and they made an offer that was like a real low ball offer. The family was like fit to be tied, you know, this, that, and the other thing. So 3 years later, after Vladimir passed away.
And at that point, when they had originally come in, you had only been there how long?
3 months.
3 months, right.
Yeah.
So 3 years later, he died April 7th, 2016. A month later, they all came back again, and Holly and the whole team were floored on the transition between marketing material and the quality. And, you know, Vladimir had this huge collection of archival pieces, and they were just jammed up in these like 20-foot shelves. We took them all down. We labeled them with the name of the design, the year it was made, and it turned into the Kagan Museum. It was fabulous. Like when Vladimir came in after we did all that work, there were like tears in his eyes. It was unbelievable.
It feels a bit to me like lightning in a bottle, that you would have this moment where both of you would feel so dedicated to something that you would commit yourselves to this process and this reinvention.
Yeah.
What convinced you, you know, you had been there for a few months, to really stick it out and to
I love being
invest.
around design. You know, I'm a textile designer, decorative designer. Just to be around all that gorgeous product. You know, if Vladimir said, Mark, I can't pay you anymore, I would still come to work. It was just, and he was the most lovely man, one of the most talented people I've ever met in my life. He was a game changer. It wasn't work. It was a passion I had. And Chris ended up knowing the aesthetic of Vladimir Kagan more than anybody else in the world.
Right. It was an extraordinary moment, yeah. And Holly, you had shared, encouraged you not just to reintroduce Vladdy's work, but to design work of your own.
Yeah, that was one of her first directives, was like design new product, and that was intimidating because it's like, oh, how do you design new product? I'm 28 years old at the time, and you want me to design new product for one of the highest in luxury furniture brands that like has a following of people, you know, and it's not just like a matter of like quality of manufacturing. It really is a matter of like quality of design, and so that was it. It wasn't what I started out with doing, like
Right, and his hardcore fans, right, looking at you and wondering, right,
yeah, like
what you were going to do
is
wrong.
this
what
kid
you were
gonna, yeah, like more so like how is this gonna not translate and not be at that. So I kind of kicked that can down the road for a couple years, and I dove into the archives to do reintroductions, because I really wanted to, like, if I was gonna do something new, I wanted to really understand where all of this was coming from. And I had 7 decades worth of like research, and we had an incredible archive, and so that's kind of what we started out doing. I did do the 312 cast bench, which was a new, and we relaunched it in the Forward collection recently in a wood version, and that was a new design that we put out, and we just kind of like stood back to see what happened. And it had a lot of success. I mean, it was a bench. It was like, it's not the biggest piece of furniture that most people go to buy. So it was kind of a safe thing to test. And we just had a lot of success there. So that actually kind of gave me some confidence, I think, in like, all right, I think I can do this. I want to start playing around with some of these ideas I've had brewing for a while, and then start telling a story a little bit.
Of your story with Vlad, yeah.
Yeah.
So here we are. It's really a wonderful moment where you're debuting the Forward collection. And I'm going to sort of hand it over to you if you don't mind, because I know there's an order in which you like to share the pieces. And they'll be scrolling through. Unfortunately, we're not particularly aligned. We're not going to be able to click through as you're speaking about them, but you'll see them come up on the screen.
Yeah, and I'll try to describe them so you'll know when they come up. I usually start with the Bind and Stock coffee table, which was a design that I kind of concepted when I was back at school after my internship. And I was really inspired. The first thing I was inspired by Vladdy's work was not the sculptural curvy stuff. It was the Omnibus collection, which is much more like structured. It's a massive sectional collection. And I just found it interesting that there wasn't really a coffee table for it. And so I actually concepted that design when I was back in school and worked on it through some classes that I had. And
right, your sketches are in the book.
Sketches are there, and I actually put it in a student competition. The Bind and Stock Furniture Library had a student competition. That's how it got its name. It won the competition. So it's an award-winning table.
$10,000 he got.
Yeah, I was the richest senior student there was at the time. And so that piece kind of starts there, and I like to start there because it's really like an origin to the story.
And that's the lucite piece.
That's the lucite table.
tray.
Yeah, that's the sketch there. I'm sure the table pops up afterwards. So then I usually go to the sculpted saddle seat stools. That was a form that I did. I actually conceived kind of around the same time, and I was really just playing with dynamic line work. Vladdy would often talk about the line work behind designs, and when I was an intern, like I said, we didn't do a lot of design work necessarily, but we did cruise his little whaler around the harbor and look at all the big yachts, and then talk about like, oh, the line work in this yacht design, and so I was kind of playing with that, and I used the stool then as really a tool for me to kind of personally study Kagan and try to understand like how he carves wood frames and what that construction is like. It evolved into understanding his philosophy. There's the stools. Understanding his philosophy of ergonomics, and that like it doesn't have to be a big puffy cushion to be comfortable. It needs to fit the human body. And he would often reference a saddle, an English or a Western riding saddle, and how that is, in a sense, ergonomic. And so taking all of that and putting it into this stool, and that's the outcome.
And I have to tell you, Vladimir, one of his most famous quotes to me was, "I designed vessels to hold the human body," and that's really encapsulates all his work.
From there, I go to the bench. The bench is, that's the Holly story essentially. If you kind of follow this timeline, that's around the time that Holly was like, hey, design me a new bench. And so we reintroduced it in wood to bring it into the collection for the Forward collection.
And was that a conversation with Holly as well and Mark in terms of materiality and budget and production?
Well, the best thing about Holly is, when I was in retail, we used to take over company after company, and we always used to go in and tell them, okay, you're our company, we're going to tell you what to do. And I said to myself, here we go, we're getting it taken over and we're going to get told what to do. But I have to tell you, Holly, when she saw what we did, in the 3 years from the first time she saw the company, she just let us go. We just manage ourselves. They had no involvement. We just did our own thing, and it was a beautiful thing. That's how truthful we got. So
you really had a lot of creative freedom in terms. Of course, you were honoring the legacy of Kagan and his choices, but you had an ability to use whatever materials you might want to do.
Yeah. The next piece was the one you just maybe saw before that sketch. It's sculpted wood love seat. That's really a nod back to the Honesty collection and the designs that he was kind of playing with, and this way of constructing sofas and looking at sofas. And so I felt like I wanted to have something like that as an offering from our brand that Holly Hunt could represent. And so that was kind of where that one came from. And then this one, the big picture sofa, that photo there hanging above the big picture is kind of partially where the name comes from. And I don't always have an aha moment when I design a piece of furniture and it's like, like that's the inspiration. I'm going to sketch it down. Like that doesn't always happen. We talk about it like it does, but in the big picture sofa, it did. Mark and I were sitting in the studio and kind of talking about, I don't know what we were talking about, but I was looking at that sofa, I guess the big picture, and I was looking at that sofa, and that photo. There's a little drawing in the bottom corner that was on the carpenter or the craftsman's desk, and I guess I just looked at that and I saw something different, and I've been kind of mulling over this design for a while in my head, and so I went back and put it in, and it really became kind of like the second part of why big picture is like this idea of really looking at a sofa, understanding Kagan qualities and interpreting that into something new, but not letting it be too influenced. You know, I wasn't trying to just simply recreate a Serpentine sofa. I think there's enough people out there doing that already. You know, I wanted to have something that kind of fit in the collection and looked like it belonged. So.
Finding that equipoise between his vision and yours.
Yeah.
And may I ask you, Mark, now that this is moving out into the world, you had a great way of framing it that I'd like to let you explain in terms of allowing a new voice to take a storied brand and lead it into the future.
Well, you know, Kagan is a luxury brand, just like, you know, Chanel, Gucci, you know, and when Chanel died, they didn't just stop and, you know, only do the designs that she did. They moved on. They had different iterations with keeping with the same aesthetic as the Kagan brand had in the past. So the idea is to do classic collection, which is like our meat and potatoes, reintroduction, which are designs that Vladimir did that we just put back into the line, reinterpretations with different materials, and then going forward, which are the go-forward pieces that Chris has mastered, and he has the torch, and he's taking the torch and bringing the company into the next iteration of design. And I think he's done an unbelievable job. Truthfully, if you look at those designs and you didn't know he was really responsible, you would say that they're Kagan, you know.
I think both of you were really fortunate. I think, I wanted to say, I think Vladimir was very fortunate to have the two of you come together in this moment because not everyone necessarily would have come in and spent all of that time studying the archives. Some would have just been very eager to put their own mark on things and maybe just launch something right away. So I think there's just a real honor and respect for what came before. Well, of course, bringing your own energy to it. So that's the best possible outcome, it seems. I also wanted to ask you, you know, beyond craft and design, and I think we've talked about a couple of them, what were some of the other life lessons that that Vladdy imbued, that you took from him?
You know, Vladdy enjoyed life more in 1 minute than most people do an entire year. We'd be eating breakfast, and he'd take those little clamshell Smucker's jams, and he would dip a spoon into it. Oh, Mark, isn't it just lovely? And I'm saying to myself, Vladdy, it's a Smucker's jam. That's how he was. You know, we'd be in he used to always make me get gas before we returned the car at the airport, and I was the one that, I don't care about the extra $3. Let's just go drop the car off. And we'd be sitting in a gas station, and it's pouring out, and I'm miserable. And all of a sudden, he sees the oil floating on a puddle, and he goes, you know, Mark, we've been having trouble coming up with some concept for a buffet, so when people put dishes and drinks on it, it doesn't leave rings. Why don't we do that kind of a oil slick on a brass plate? We'll have somebody engrave it. So no matter where you are, he was constantly designing. Everything was constantly fabulous, no matter how dire the situation used to be.
Yeah, I think I'd echo that. Like, his love of life was just like fun to be around, you know. And he was adventurous, and he was so humorous and like a trickster, you know. And would just. I remember we were visiting Melanie Coubert's new showroom that she had in New York. She had just opened it, and on the way, we had stopped at one of these like cart vendors that you have in New York City, and they had this little cup of coffee. It was a fake spilled cup of coffee, but it was in like the little classic blue cup and everything that they had, and we had bought it, and he had put it in his bag, and we're sitting in the showroom waiting for Melanie to like come out, and he pulls it out of his bag and he puts it on the chair next to him, and she comes out and he goes, Melanie, I'm so sorry. And she was like, it's okay, you know, because it looks so real. And then he like picked it up and was like, I got you, you know. And it's just like that kind of like just love of life, you know, and how to enjoy it, and you know, not take things too serious. Like, we're designing furniture here, you know, kind of deal. And yeah, it was great. It's a fun story.
A lot of luck. It's in the luck, right? And here you all are. And we clearly wanted to make sure that we left room for anything else that you might want to share, is that we haven't touched on, and opened up for questions as well.
I love what I do.
Yeah.
You know, leaving retail I thought it might be kind of crazy, but it was the best thing that ever happened in my life. And there's still not one day that goes by that I don't miss Vladimir.
That you don't miss Vladimir.
Yep.
Yeah, he, as like a small town kid from Missouri who didn't grow up getting far out of the state or the Midwest, having him be the person to show you the world, take you to
Switzerland and yeah, another boondoggle.
And live in Nantucket.
They had great times together.
You know, all of that. Like, if anybody was gonna take you around and show you that, I'm glad it was him, because he just had a lot of fun doing it. So.
And clearly he saw so much in you as well, so something to carry forward. Yeah. Thank you so much to you both. What a special opportunity to get to hear this straight from you.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you. May we answer any questions?
Q&A time?
Yeah, Q&A time.
Come on, not one.
Yeah, for Chris, and perhaps maybe Mark too. For each of you, what is your favorite design and why?
I'm going to answer this in a very typical Kagan way. And I'm going to say that it's whatever I'm currently working on.
Yes, that was Vladimir saying.
That's what...
Anybody asked him that, my favorite design is the one I'm currently working on.
and I think it's because it just like that's what you're thinking about. That's what your challenge is, and that's what you're trying to figure out. It's not that I don't enjoy looking at or didn't enjoy any of the other designs that I've done in the past, but the one I'm currently working on is the one that's like top of mind. So.
And they're like children, you love them all.
But if you had to take one home.
I took them all home.
Probably the mini sofa, because it's named after me, Minichiello. He was unbelievable.
Okay.
Do you when you're talking about being really sort of single-minded about what you're doing, do you look at what other designers are doing, or do you kind of try to put the blinders on and focus on kind of the Kagan aesthetic?
I think it's good to be aware of what other designers are doing, but I try not to be too influenced or inspired by them. I try to find my own inspiration. Vladdy and I would talk a lot about how like inspiration's out there. You just have to be looking for it, you know? And sometimes it comes to you, but most of the time it's like, you know, you find it. And so keep your eyes peeled for it. It could be anything from, like, it could be, you know, you see what somebody else does and like, it can be inspiring, but that doesn't mean you're gonna go and like do something like that, you know? Or you could see an oil slick on the ground, and that can be like inspiring too. So.
Yeah, Vladimir really didn't care what anybody else was doing. He did his own thing, and he stuck by it. He'd pass a bridge, and in 5 minutes it'd be a drop-leaf dining table. You know, it's just amazing.
All right, I have a question.
Okay.
So, Chris, how do you maintain that sense of wonder and that sense of looking around you and finding the inspiration that you expressed that you learned from Vladimir?
How do I maintain that sense of wonder?
And that's the first day of your internship, I should just point out, yes?
Yeah, look how young he was.
I know.
Adorable.
I try to just travel a little bit and get out and not. It's so tough. I'm a studio rat. I could stay in the studio all day if you let me. And so I try to get out and believe it or not, forget about the project I'm working on, and try to let my mind go somewhere else and not get too consumed in my job, essentially, and take a break and try to just like see the world around me. I don't know if that answers your question, but we got one over here.
Oh.
Chris, when you are creating, I don't need that, I can talk. Do you think of creating something that, boy, he would be so proud of this piece and his, you know, thinking of his memory and what he brought to you. I mean, you can't sort of let go of what he would love. I mean, that's what I would do.
No, you're right. It is a hard thing to let go. Like every time I design a piece of furniture, I do think like, man, would he like this? You know, like what would he think? Like there is this voice in the back of your head that is kind of like, in a way, talking you through it or coaching you. Because like when you design, there's so many little design decisions that you have to make. They're a matter of an inch or a quarter of an inch, and you can get really caught up on that as the one that's so close to it, and nobody else is gonna notice it, you know. And so yeah, I do try to, for lack of a spiritual way, channel some energy, you know, and see where that takes me.
But I have to tell you, Vladimir would be very proud to see what Chris and I have done with the company. Very proud.
How many pieces do you work on at a time?
A lot. no joke, I have like, my process is to think a lot. And so I will think about a design for months or years sometimes, just on like different aspects to it, before I maybe even start sketching around with it. Or I might sketch something and be like, well, that's definitely not what I wanted, so I'm gonna think on that one. And so I'll kind of constantly have some things I'm thinking about on what I wanna do next. Just in like my daily line of work, projects move. So it's not like you don't design a chair and then you finish and complete that chair and then you do a table. Like you design the chair and then while the chair is sitting in queue and at the workshop to be worked on or whatever, you're working on the table or I might hop from that to a console. I might have a concept that I want to do, but I don't have the collection around it, and I know it's going to take 3 or 4 years to develop that kind of in its entirety, and so I might work on that a little bit. I try to do what I want to do, I've really been wanting to get to this particular design, and try to just carve out time to do that one, because that's what I want to do. That's what makes me feel good today, Sometimes you don't always get to do what you want to do. Sometimes you have to do the design that is like, oh, this one is not working, but I got to make it work. But yeah, to answer your question more directly, like I work on a lot of them at once, and as Vladdy would say, let's keep some balls up in the air, like constantly keep them moving in flux.
And we try to have a 3 to 4 year product development schedule that, it ebbs and flows, but, we always want to have something in the pipeline to be fresh.
It takes a while to get a piece of furniture designed and done right. It rarely happens on the first try.
Just as a follow-up to what you were just saying, do you design single pieces then? Or is your preference, or do you work on the collections? Like, do you think as a collection, or do you think as a single piece that then develops into a collection?
Both. So it happens a lot as like single pieces. Like I'll have an idea for a sofa per se, and I might work on that a little bit. But like as in the general scope of things, you want to do a collection. So sometimes it's about like, finding those pieces and how do they go together, and you can tie that in by telling a story. So like I talk about the Forward collection a lot, and if you just like looked at all of those pieces individually, you'd be like, these don't really go together other than they look like Vladimir Kagan, right? But when you start talking about the story and you put them in a timeline of when they were conceived and developed, and people start to understand like where they come from, it becomes a collection. So there is a little bit of a way in like collections don't have to be like this is a dining collection. Like you can do that and that's a way to design a collection, but you can also tie pieces together through the story that you're telling. And so individual pieces can kind of form into a collection as well. It's again an ebb and flow. She's got a follow-up. Yeah, I like this.
Sorry. Thank you. Let me just try to remember what I was thinking. Now that I thought about it. So now that Kagan has passed away and you are now design development for the company, what part of your own personal voice as a designer is entering into your process versus you reflecting back what Kagan taught you? Like, are you differentiating yourself at this point from him and creating your own design path in addition to him, or are you just staying inside the Kagan wheelhouse?
I kind of see my own design path as a little bit of an extension of Kagan, right? So I've only really worked for one brand and one person, and and he was my mentor. And so the beginning of my career is really like a reflection of, I feel like, the end of his. And so like on this new collection, like I look at the pieces and I definitely see myself in them. Yes, they are inspired by this time that I had with Vladdy, but and because of that, I guess I see some of Vladdy's elements in them, but I see a lot of like of my own kind of, I guess, ideas, like that stool, like that was my own idea that I used to adapt and learn these kind of like Kagan ways, right? That coffee table, you know, same thing as like that's my own idea that I kind of did to fit in with Kagan. And so yeah, I don't know if that answered it or not, but cool.
And that's an important question because I feel you have to, as a creative person, feel like you're exercising your own voice as well. So
yeah.
Well, I think that is it. Remember to always enjoy the jam. And please join us at Kneedler Fauchère for reception and to meet Chris and Mark. Thank you so very much. Thank you, you guys.